Before I get into my week, I wanted to share that I'm a finalist for the worldwide Kish competition for my cherubs painting. It's on Facebook, and the public can vote for their favorite paintings by clicking the like button. So if you would like to participate and vote, I would really appreciate it. I have a link in the description box down below so you can vote for the paintings that you like. Okay, now onto my Atelier diary. So this is week 6 of the fall trimester of 2017. Last week, I finished up my portrait of Kevin that I've been working on, and so now we're starting a brand new long pose, and our long poses last for 5 weeks. Now, we usually will start the long pose on Monday. Our model for this is Brian, but he was not able to come in on this first day. So we had a model named Dimitri come in, and he just posed for 1 day for 3 hours. And I did this little color study. And so I already had a scrap piece of canvas that had an imprimatura on it, so I used that to do this little color study, and I think it went really well. Before, when I do paintings, I will usually do a transfer drawing or draw with charcoal, but doing these little color studies, I just do everything in paint. So I draw it out in paint and then do the color block in. I feel like I'm getting a lot better and more comfortable with doing block-ins, and so I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. Tuesday, Brian came in to start the long pose, and first I spent a little bit of time just doing a small pencil drawing so I could figure out the pose and kind of get comfortable with it. But then I started my large transfer drawing, which I do on Canson paper with I use vine charcoal and a little bit of nitrum as well. And what I did was I took Canson paper and a half sheet of Canson paper and taped it on the back so I can get a nice big drawing out of this. Wednesday, I'm working the pose out more and just trying to make sure that I'm working simply with as long lines as possible to get the pose start to feel like it's locked in. Thursday, I'm working more with locking in the shadow shapes so I can see the shadow shapes and the light shapes clearly and make sure that everything's getting accurate that way. One thing, when Matt came by for my critique that day, I told him that I felt like the left arm that's hanging down, I felt like it looked too short, but also when I was comparing that arm to other elements in the painting or in the drawing, that I felt like I needed to actually shorten it, but I was telling him it already looked too short anyways, and so I didn't know what to do. And so he looked at my drawing and said that it actually does need to be, the hand needs to be brought up a little bit, which would shorten it even more. But he said the reason why it was looking short in the first place is because other proportions in the drawing was relatively making the arm look too short, even though it was actually a tiny bit too long. So he said the head and the face were too big, the arm that's holding the pole and the shoulder were too long and also too thick. And so I corrected the proportions on the head, the arm, the shoulder, and made them the proper size of how Brian's arm, shoulder, and head actually are, and it totally helped me be able to see that the hanging arm was actually the proper proportion, and so even just raising the hand up a little bit, which it needed to go up a little bit, made it look accurate. So things like that I find really helpful to having other people be looking at my stuff and giving me input, because I don't know if I would have gotten that so fast if it would have just been myself trying to figure out what was looking off with my drawing. Friday, I'm working on making sure that I can get everything that I need to in the drawing that'll really help me start the painting on it, since this is just a transfer drawing. And when Magda came by, she was looking at she said that the knees down to the feet, it looked like I made those proportions too big. I made them too long and too thick again, and so I saw that, and then I corrected them by making them smaller, but I think I overdid it on the standing leg that's on the left. I think I made that a little bit, I don't think I made it too thin, but I think I made it too short. So I didn't catch that that day, so I will just have to fix that in paint, which shouldn't be a problem. On for my still life that I work on in the afternoons. So I feel like I'm making a lot of progress with this still life, but there are elements to this painting that I really don't like, that I don't like how it's turning out, and I don't quite know how to make it better. So I was talking to Matt about that, and he really helped me with the garlics. So the garlics, I've been really trying to make them as bright and colorful as they actually look, but I feel like I have it as bright and colorful as I can get it. Though Matt says he can show me some tricks to push some color in later, but I still wasn't liking how they were looking, and he was saying that he thinks that's because of the technique of what I was doing to build up the garlics. And so he was saying that the garlics have this transparent skin on them, and so there are some elements where I'm getting that in the painting that's getting the garlics to look like they have that transparent skin, and it's more so on the edges of the garlic where I took my paint and I kind of just thinned it a little bit with medium and just kind of dragged it into the background for where the garlic skins just kind of they go out and blend out into the background. And I would just do that just with a paint stroke, and I liked how that looked, and he said that I painted those in a direct way, and so I should paint the whole garlic in a direct way of painting, which is kind of more like an alla prima type of way, where I'm not really thinking about glazing or working on small parts of them, but just repainting the whole thing in a more fluid brushstrokey way. And so I did that and I repainted the garlics like that, and I like how they look a whole lot better. And also it's more fun to paint that way too, I think. It's kind of more stakes because you can mess your painting up more because you're taking more risks with like pulling paint into each other, and so you can kind of lose the drawing, and you can kind of lose also the freshness of the paint. If you do it too much, the colors can kind of get muddy or gray. But so it is harder. So I think before, when I was painting before, maybe I was it took me a while to get the drawing of the garlics to fit on the plank of wood. So I think I was just being more cautious so I didn't lose that. But painting them more in a direct way, I like how they look a whole lot better, and it's more fun to do that way, even if it is kind of scary and risky feeling. Tuesday and Wednesday I've been working more on the pot. So I've been working on the drawing of it to get the base of the pot to kind of, well, recede how it does, and to just make the shapes more accurate in it, because that was kind of the furthest away in the painting. And I've worked on the upper part of the pot, kind of just all over. It's been really fun to paint because I've been using really deep reds with cadmium red light, alizarin crimson. I'll mix in some blue into it, and a lot of black. And so I kind of slowly build, like I start dark and I really slowly build it up and getting the reds more intense. And I saved this intense red color, which is more cadmium red with maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson in it, just for the end. And that color on it, since I built it up so slowly from the darks, it's like such an intense color, which is really cool to see. Also working on some highlights in the pot. I'm kind of finding that using these intense colors, I really like that look, but in the highlights I do need to add some white, because just using the pure colors, it doesn't get the look that I want it to. But using white, I don't know, I guess I kind of lose that nice freshness, and it can kind of look more milky and cloudy or chalky, which I don't want it to. So I'm still kind of figuring out stuff with the pot, but it's a lot of fun to paint. Thursday, I ended up not being able to work on my still life because I've had a cold this week. You might hear it in my voice, and I was just too tired Thursday, so I had to go home and rest, so I didn't get to work on my still life that day. On Friday, Matt and Magda have invited me to work on a portrait with them, and our model is this guy named Dimitri, which is the same guy that I talked about on Monday of this day that I did the color study of. So he's sitting for a portrait, and I really like how it's turning out. It's a whole lot of fun, and there's something that's really different about this too. Well, Matt has set up this portrait, and it's for his specific painting, and so I'm just kind of tagging along on it. And so Matt has a specific look that he wants, and so he told Dimitri, instead of having his viewpoint where he's going to be holding his gaze every time he's modeling so he doesn't, you know, move his head around too much, to have that instead of being just a random spot in the room, instead to look at me, because it'll kind of keep his eyes more alive. And so Dimitri is holding direct eye contact with me for a lot of it. I feel like sometimes it's too much, and maybe he'll look at my chin or my ear a little bit, well, not directly in my eyes, but most of the time we're making direct eye contact with each other, and I have never ever drawn or painted someone like this, and it's a whole new experience for me. My last portrait that I was doing with Kevin, I talked about how I feel like I'm getting my or the technique of drawing and painting someone's face is becoming a little bit more second nature, so I'm not just like focused solely on technique, but I'm kind of more aware of what I'm actually doing. And I was talking about how it really is an honor, I feel, to be able to study someone's face, someone that is not just a photograph, but someone that is living and breathing and moving, that's right in front of you. For Kevin, though, I am allowed to look at his face and make eye contact with him and study his whole face, but his viewpoint was past me to the left. So with Dimitri, it's just something totally different, that he's also looking and being able to study my face as well. So it's just really intense, and his gaze is intense as well, because he has his head tilted down a little bit. So I don't know, it's just really different and interesting, and I definitely feel the pressure, because someone is literally watching me as I watch them try and draw their face. So yeah, I started off how I normally do, where I'm just worrying about the big shapes, the big light shape and shadow shape. When I was doing, I mean, obviously the most uncomfortable thing for me is when I'm working on his eyes. So I'm literally looking and studying his eyes while he's looking into my eyes. And before it was okay, because I was more looking at the whole shadow shape of the eye sockets. But once I had that in to get it closer to nature, his eye sockets aren't a flat tone, and I can see his irises, and I can see a little bit of the white of the eye, and especially the lower lid. There's this rim of light on it that's really beautiful, and so I needed to start showing that in the painting, or in the drawing. And so then that was weird, because I'm looking for a long time in his eyes, trying to judge measurements so I can get that. It's really fun though. It's I feel really alive doing this, and this is something that if Matt hadn't have asked Dimitri to look at me while I'm painting him, I don't know if I would have done this for a while, doing a portrait, I mean, where there is direct eye contact, because it is something that is a little bit uncomfortable. But I'm really glad that he said that, and it's forcing me into this, because I'm having such a experience, like an intense experience doing this, and I hope that then the viewer can have that intense experience too, where maybe they get that feeling of really looking in someone's eyes. You do get a really strong connection with the other person as two human beings looking deeply at each other. So I've also been thinking too about that I've never really thought about that with other portraits that I really like, where there is direct eye contact, that thinking that the painter is studying them and they're studying the painter. So I don't know, this is just all really new and really interesting. And then I guess how I did this is, so I have the canvas and the imprimatura on it, which is already dry. So I'm just using fine charcoal with a little bit of Nitram as well. Actually, I've been using mostly, I guess, the Nitram, because Nitram has these yellow sticks that are really soft, and I find that really, really nice working on canvas. And then also white chalk, if I didn't mention that as well. And one thing that one thing that I wanted to mention, that I got a tip from Sean Burke, who, if you don't know that painter, you should look him up, because I really like his work, and I follow him on Patreon, and he mentioned in one of the posts on his Patreon account that he was working on a pencil drawing, and to soften transitions, he would just tap his finger where the transition needed to be softened, and I never thought about doing that before. I definitely use my hands when I draw, but I've never thought about tapping onto the paper. So I did that with the charcoal drawing, and I really like that effect. And I did that in the middle of the drawing as well. So I already had the charcoal kind of sketchily getting, you know, Dimitri's forms in there. And then I wanted to start making it look more atmospheric and naturalistic. So I definitely needed to start softening transitions. And so tapping on the canvas would soften the transitions nicely. But when I was refining it more, I found out when I wanted to soften transitions or get it even more atmospheric, tapping my finger was kind of too clumsy then, and it took too much charcoal off. So then I was just using charcoal to get it more atmospheric. But then, okay, so then lastly with this portrait, I will start painting it next Friday. But this, like I said, this is all Matt's, this is all for Matt doing his painting, and I'm just tagging along. So Matt's going to be hiring Dimitri as long as he needs to finish up his painting. So I don't know how far I'll be able to take this, since Matt can paint really well and super fast. So yeah, so even if the painting doesn't, I can't push it as much as I want with this painting, definitely I want to do these type of portraits in the future where there's that direct eye contact, because I think it's very, very interesting.